Alright, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We're here in the solemnity of Christmas still, and being the solemnity of the Mary Mother of God, I figure we start with a Hail Mary. So we'll do it. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So, this is my first guest. Thank you for being a guest on my YouTube channel. John, my brother. And so you are the admin of a Facebook group.
Yes, it's my Facebook page, Anime Memes with Catholic Themes.
Anime Memes with Catholic Themes.
Yep.
Alright, so what made you get into that?
It's a long and nuanced story. So, I got into anime back when I was in high school. I had seen a few anime shows before, but it never really occurred to me that it was different from other cartoons, because like how young I was, I always figured all cartoons were the same. But when I was in high school is when I recognized it for the medium that it is. And I was into it for a while, but of course after I graduated high school, you know, I got caught up in life and all that, and I kind of stopped getting into it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, like, because my main thing was always video games all my life. Like, I was always like, that's my hobby, was video games. But as I keep collecting them, and I like to replay old video games too, so it eventually reached a point where I had more games than I had time to play within a reasonable amount of time. So I just stopped buying new games, and I continued with what I had. But I also realized that you always need something new to kind of like keep life fresh. Like, for example, on my iTunes, I have different playlists for portions of my life. Mm-hmm. Like, I have a playlist for all the music I listened to in elementary school. I have a playlist for all the music I listened to in middle school, a playlist for all the music I listened to in high school, and so on. And I realized that high school was my largest playlist by more than twice of the next largest list. And I think that's kind of why so many people get attached to their high school memories, or why they're so nostalgic of high school, is because of how much you were learning, not just learning in terms of like education or books, but learning from like experience, sights, and sounds. Like, there's so much
newness.
Yeah, so much newness that's what kind of holds a lot of people's minds to high school. So, you know, I needed, you know, something new to keep life kind of fresh, you know, and video games can be very time consuming because, you know, there's side quests and extra little things you could do. I mean, you could spend up to like 60 hours on one game, just, you know, it all depends on how much you're willing to invest in it, whereas, you know, an anime being a show is very finite, 24 minutes and that's it. It's, you know, you can get a lot more done watching anime than playing video games, basically, so that's kind of
like doing something while you're watching it, or you...
No, but I'm saying, like, it doesn't take up as much of my time as video games because it has a finite space of time. So that's when I got back into it. And as for the page, the first time I made the page was before I got back into it. This was when I first came back to the church. And there was like a bunch of Catholic pages I was following. One in particular, which was one of my favorites, was very against anime, and he'd always make jokes about it or pick on people for it, and I kind of resented that. So the first time I made the page was kind of out of spite. So, and I wasn't really watching anime at the time, but I still had sympathies for it, so this was kind of out of spite. But my memes were terrible. Nobody followed, nobody liked my posts, and I deleted it almost as easily as I made it. And then about a year or so later is when I got back into it.
And so, like, what year was that?
The first time I made the page, I think it was like it would have been about 2019.
Okay.
Because I know the second time I made the page, this time I was back into anime, and so it was new to me, and I had just come back to the church too, so they were both kind of new to me, and they were both kind of like old loves rekindled, so like this time I wanted to make the page just, out of admiration and not out of spite. So this time, like the second page was made September 4th, 2020. So that's when I made the page that I have now by the exact same name. And because, I'm doing it as a labor of love as opposed to out of spite, the memes are coming along more naturally. I managed to hold the page for 4 years, which I didn't see doing because I thought I was going to run out of ideas by the end of the first. But, it's been 4 years now. I have 6,500 people following, and the average post is about 100 reacts, so it's been going pretty good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, alright, so I didn't realize that you had been away from anime and then just got back into it. You said, like, around 2020. I guess it's been like 4 years. Because I remember being on your page, and it was probably around 2020. That's probably the same page that I was on, and then I, like, deleted Facebook for a couple of years, and then came back and rejoined the page, so. That's cool. So, you said anime is, like, different than other animations. So, for somebody that's just, like, completely, like, in the dark here, explain what makes anime? Does it have to be, because obviously not anything that's animated, right?
Right. Like, so usually, most of the time you just refer to cartoons as cartoons, but with anime, you call it anime because it has a certain style, which, from the outside looking in, they all look the same, but like once you get into it, like every anime does have like its different style, eyes might be drawn different, textures might be different, but it's still mostly like the same kind of art style. And of course, they're all made in Japan, or East Asia at the very least. So, and it's kind of a very gray area for Catholics. Like, internet Catholics are kind of divided 50-50 between loving it and just absolutely hating it and thinking it's the devil. And I think that comes from, there's two aspects to it. The first is the morality of the storytelling, which, because this is East Asia, and because their culture is very collective, they always believe in giving of yourself for the whole, like putting the whole before yourself. That's why, like, in Japan, they always put last name first, because the family comes before the self. So a lot of the morality in anime does revolve around, sacrificing yourself for the greater good, sacrificing yourself for the team, and putting everyone else first. So it does have a lot of strong, moral points, but the other part of this that I unfortunately have to admit is that it has a lot of, like, fan service and sexual undertones, because, again, very collectivist society, but also very horny society. So that's kind of where that is. So, so when watching anime, I would just, like, watch for the tags that say what category it is, whether it's comedy, romance, because, like, you'll have tags like harem, you want to avoid those, or ecchi, you want to avoid those. So always be mindful, like, just look for the tags and read the synopsis and know what it is before you start watching it, would be, like, my rule of thumb.
Okay, well, you answered one of my other questions there, because I was wondering what was because obviously there's, like, well, your page does it, like, couples the anime with the Catholicism. Like, what is the, I guess, binding thing there? Like, what makes this appeal to Catholics? But I guess you kind of... So, the other question I have is, does it have to be from Japan? Like, what if you're a guy that's into anime, and you're also, like, into drawing cartoons? Like, could you just start making anime, and you're in America, and it would still be considered anime? Has anybody done that?
Yeah, so the first time I saw, like, because there's anime and then there's manga. Manga is basically like the comic book form of anime. And I've seen Western-made manga, but it's not very attractive. Like, most people that are into anime, they want it to stay Japanese. And, like, I think partly because of stubborn pride, but also because, like, when it gets westernized, like, it'll start off good, but then it gets mainstream, and Western mainstream entertainment, as you've seen, is very obnoxious and annoying, and so there have already been talks, like, I've seen articles with, like, Disney wanting to get into the medium, and other mainstream companies wanting to get into the medium, and every anime fan that I know, whether they're religious or atheist, left or right, they all hate the idea of mainstream West making anime because they're just going to butcher it.
I see.
So you could, and people may give it a chance, but as far as, like, mainstream companies like Disney, like, if Disney tried to get into it, I think people would be a lot more resistant or hesitant to get into it than, say, just a random person just doing it on their own. Because that's the main thing, is it's not so much that they want to keep it Japanese as much as they just don't want mainstream West touching it or getting involved or influencing it. Because then also the morality changes. Because, like, entertainment is like its own propaganda, and the propaganda they have in the East, they're trying to get, you know, people to start families, they're trying to get people to, you know, be more reproductive. Like, a lot of recent animes try to, like, get the idea of, oh, you want to start a family, you want to have kids and all this. So their propaganda is trying to get you to start a family, whereas Western propaganda is, like, trying to get you to be gay. Yeah. So, like, there's, like, one of my favorite animes, Clannad, which, again, it has its fair share of sexual undertones, but it also has this one character, Nagisa. Now, all of her life, she's always kind of been sickly. She's always had this illness that she's fought with. She lost 2 years of school because of this illness. But eventually she graduates, she gets married, and now she's pregnant. And it's one of those, the pregnancies can hurt the mother, which most abortions, you know, are elective, but this is one of those, that there's actually an argument to be had here. And everyone tries to tell Nagisa that, like, your body can't handle this, you should probably abort. But she insists, no, even if it costs me my life, I want to be a mother. This child is in me, and I want to give birth to it. So I thought that was very good on them for keeping that, you know, moral point there.
Yeah. That sounds good. Let's see. I guess the other thing is, like, so we talked about, like, the Catholicism and the anime. So I guess there's, like, in that whole realm, it seems like, from what I gathered, it's like the traditional Catholics are the ones that are, like. So what can you make of this kind of a correlation with, like, the trad Catholics and the anime?
The trad Catholics are the ones who are most divided on anime, between loving it and hating it.
I actually haven't heard any of this anime is the devil type thing. I've just, you know, maybe just people like myself that's not into it, you know, not necessarily.
Well, because Japan is a very pagan nation, so they also kind of have, like, some paganism in there too, you know, but...
Are there any, like, Catholic animes? Or is it just kind of...
Not really. Because, like, well, the Japanese are, like, very proud of their traditions, they're very proud of their culture, and they kind of see Christianity as being invasive. So, they don't always have, like, the best outlook or understanding of Christianity, but, so, like I said, it's like, as a Catholic, anime is, like, water to tread. You know, I wouldn't say it's something you could just jump into wholesale, but so long as you're mature and you know what you're watching, then.
So what you're doing on your Facebook page is kind of the best
Yeah.
mixture of the two. All right, so you don't see any kind of like, yeah, I don't know. For me, I was thinking, well, maybe it was just a generational things. Like the Latin mass kind of like is falling into this, like our generation, I guess, is like more like it's more like the young people that are like taking on to that, and then it seems like the anime to me it seems like it's maybe like a generational thing. I don't know if you see that. Like maybe it's more like people your age. I say your age, but
Right. Well, again, like it all goes back to like entertainment being like secondary propaganda. Is like the Japanese, yes, they want other Japanese to have families and they have strong family morality, but it also coincides with we want you to be a Japanese family, so you also need to be pagan. So, there's some give and take there. But like I said, like they have like intentions to try and keep the family unit together and to try and keep generations going. So
what kind of stuff do you have on your high school playlist?
Music-wise, mostly classic rock and 80s metal.
So what kind of music do you listen to now?
Japanese pop.
Ah.
Because that's, because you watch a lot of animes and they have like openings and closings, and like every season will change the opening and closing songs, and a lot of these songs are really good. So, because Japan also has a very, very, very strong music industry. So.
Is it the same as K-pop? Or K-pop's Korean?
Korean, yeah.
Okay, so this is J-pop.
Yeah. I don't really get into Korean entertainment. No particular reason, just never really been into it.
So after you said you had like elementary, middle school, high school, do you have any more playlists after that? Like the stuff you listen to now?
Yeah, I have a playlist for the year I spent up north, then I have another playlist for when I was at Dairy Queen. I have 2 playlists for when I was at Walgreens because of how long I was there, and then I have a playlist that's currently being made for this span of my life.
That's probably smarter than what I'm doing. Is I have one for every year. And I started that in like 2017. Yeah, because I was trying to make a playlist for my graduation party, and it just turned into like, this is my 2017 playlist. And then when the New Year's came around, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to start making a one for 2018. So every time I start listening to it, it's like a song just gets into my head or something else I get into. I added to the playlist,
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I just kept doing that. So now, like, I don't know how it's working out for me, really, because, like, my 2024 playlist, it started out really great, because I had, like, just discovered all these new Christian, like, hard rock bands at the beginning of the year, and I was like, oh, this is great. So I added them all to my 2020. So it's kind of cool, because I know if I want to look for that group of songs, it's in my 2024 playlist, but I don't know how much I actually listened to it this year. Like, I started the year off listening to it, then, like, the new Seether came out, and I think I put, like, that on there. I think that was it, and then I haven't. So I don't know. Maybe that's a new approach I don't know. It's for me. It's less. Like if I listen to my 2020 playlist, it doesn't necessarily take me back to 2020. Kind of, some of it does. Usually the beginning of the year is really strong because I'm just starting it, and then I forget about it. But it's more like categorized where like I know if I'm looking for a certain artist or a certain song, I know I have it on a certain playlist. I can find it.
Yeah, I don't really get into music too much because there's not really a whole lot of exposure I have to music. Like when I was at Walgreens, the most exposure I had was the store radio.
Uh-huh.
So that's where a lot of the music I got into was like, oh, the songs that I did like from the store radio. And now, I'm into anime. It's like the only exposure I have to music is like the openings and closings, or like, or if music is part of the anime, then, they may have, because like, one thing I do like about anime is that most of the voice actors, which they call seiyus, they are multi-talented. So they'll voice act, but they'll also sing. Like they'll sing their own intros and their own outros, or they'll sing their own songs in the show, and then they'll go on tour and play those songs live at concerts. So that's what I like about anime, is that it's very versatile. It could be just as much of a show as it is a concert, because, you know, the talent that goes into it is so versatile.
All stuff I did not know. So you have any other plans for the page, or maybe expanding outside of that? You know, you ever think about like what's next?
Not really.
Maybe you can make a YouTube channel. You do like mashups.
Nah, I've never really been big on YouTube.
All right. Well, I don't know. Anything else going on?
No, I guess I could just quickly share like how I got into the traditional Latin Mass.
Yeah.
So, when I first graduated high school, I was very liberal, extremely liberal, and
I did not know this.
You're right. So, so as I graduated and got out into the real world,
I think that's most people when they're in that age.
And then it's like, as I'm working for my own money and paying for my own bills for the first time, like, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was a very, very gradual stripping away over 10 years until, you know, the 2016 elections came up, and then I just found myself being very conservative because of all the experiences that I had, and I hadn't even realized that my politics had shifted like they had. So when I came back to the church, it was, I won't lie, it was completely politically motivated. Like, because, you know, being a conservative, all these conservatives are Christian, I should probably be going to church. And I didn't even know the difference between Catholics and Protestants, but I just went to the Catholic Church because that's what we grew up with, that's what I'm familiar with. So I'm just doing this, you know, for my politics. But then one day, you know, because I'm always kind of responsible for taking Mom to Mass every Sunday, so one Sunday we are late to Mass, and the only available one left is the traditional Latin Mass at 12 o'clock, which, when Mom said Latin, I always thought she meant Latin like the Spanish Mass. So that's what I thought we were going to. And then I was just completely surprised and caught off guard because I didn't even know the Latin Mass was a thing. And the Latin Mass is what really catechized me. Like, the Latin Mass is where I learned about the true presence in the Eucharist. It's how I learned about all the saints, veneration. It's, you know, it's basically like it catechized me without words. And that's when I shifted from being politically motivated to being religiously motivated. I mean, like, I still have my political positions, but they're not nearly as important to me as they used to be, because now it's like my focus is on God for God, not for politics. And as good as that was for me, it did kind of lead me down this rabbit hole of criticizing Pope Francis and anyone else who was critical of the Latin Mass. But eventually, the priest who was celebrating it nearby retired, so they had to move the congregation the next county over in Seminole, and that was much further out, but I managed to keep it up for a few years. But I was also working overnights at the time, and it was really hard on me, and it was hard on Mom too, because of the distance. So after a few years, we just, you know, decided to start going to the cathedral, which was Novus Ordo, and I didn't like it at first, but, you know, it kind of grew on me. And I also, started going to some of the other parishes nearby and started seeing that, like, oh, there's really good Novus Ordos, and then there's really bad Novus Ordos. So, you know, I kind of appreciate what I have. You know, it's the cathedral parish, which is really impressive. It's a cathedral parish, and it's a very reverent Novus Ordo. You know, the hymns are done, I like the way they do their hymns. They're not juvenile or clap happy. They're very solemn, and, you know, it's like, so I feel like it may not be the Latin Mass, but for what it's worth, it is really good, and I, you know, shouldn't ask God for more than the good He's already given me by trying to go out of my way for it. So that's where I am now. I'm pretty much settled, and I'm lean towards Latin Mass, but I have a lot of sympathies for the Novus Ordo now, and of course I have a lot of sympathies for Pope Francis. I've learned to love Pope Francis, in fact. And that's, you know, that's where I am with the church now, just comfortable going to the Novus Ordo at the cathedral parish.
Yeah, I will say that I'm always really surprised for it being St. Pete. that there's a lot of traditional people, it seems like, at the Mass there. Yeah, meanwhile, I'm like right next door to the Latin Mass and we never go. But it's nice, but
Well, it doesn't help that they don't have kneelers either.
They don't.
No, so you have to like pick up like the small little square piece of carpet to kneel on. Because they don't have traditional pews, they just have like lined up chairs with no kneelers, so.
Yeah, so what was the other thing I was gonna... Oh, I was gonna comment on you're talking about being politically motivated. I have to admit that I kind of went through the same thing too, because, going to church, but not really so much getting into it until... It was like 2020. It was like November 3rd of 2020. I think I was like, okay, time to start praying the rosary every day. And I think it was just the graces of praying the rosary every day that honestly led to a lot of more devotion. So, but it did start out with like, okay, our country's going to crap, and I need to start praying because of that. And now it's just kind of like, well, so I can relate to that. And my other question was. Oh, you were talking about being catechized by the Mass without any words. Would you say, obviously you didn't learn about the saints, they didn't just come into your head. So you're saying, like, did you say most of this came from, like, maybe just being, impressed by it and then coming home and doing your research, or, like, where did a lot of that knowledge come from?
Well, it did start from, because I'm learning about... So the Latin Mass has a lot of, unspoken body language. Like, for example, by facing the altar instead of the congregation, there's, like, this impression that he is, like, his prayers, he is speaking to God. But then there are moments when he'll turn around and say, Dominus vobiscum, which is, Lord be with you. So now he's talking to you, he's not talking to God. So depending on whether or not he's facing you or the altar, kind of gives you, like, this impression of, is he speaking to me or is he speaking to God? It makes that distinction.
Okay.
And, and it also the same way with, like, the prayers of consecration, because at a lot of times at the Novus Ordo, when they hold the communion, and I know they don't do this intentionally, but sometimes they hold it forward instead of up, because the sacrifice is being offered to God. It's not being offered to us, it's being offered to God. So when you're facing the altar, there's no mistake, it's being offered to God. Whereas if he's facing you and he's holding it forward, there can be like unspoken body language of, oh, this is for you, but it's actually a sacrifice being offered to God. So, subtle body language like that. And also, like, when the priest faces the congregation, it does give a kind of feeling of stage. Like, it makes the altar feel less like an altar and more like a stage, especially when they walk away from the lectern and they start pacing the altar for their homily. That really gives it a feeling of this is a stage and a performance, whereas facing the altar, it makes it feel more like a proper altar. So, like, there's a lot of unspoken body language, as well as unspoken body language, and just like my impression of it, like, I started learning about the Eucharist and the confession, which made me want to learn more from just, the sacraments alone and the Mass alone. So yeah, went home, started reading, and that's when I started reading about the saints. And the saints is what really shifted me from politics, because a lot of saints were politically motivated, but a lot of them weren't. Like, saints can be such a mixed bag, because you can have like these mean, aggressive saints that go off and fight wars, and then you have like the most gentle, serene saints who wouldn't hurt a fly. So like, but they each express themselves in this religious and godly way, where they give of themselves for the greater good, and that's what shifted my attention away from politics to the actual practice of religion itself, and giving myself more to God than to the systems of man.
So who's your favorite saint?
Saint Jude the Apostle.
Oh, all right. Love him.
Who is also the patron saint of our diocese,
yeah,
coincidentally.
Very cool. All right. So any other cool plans for the new year?
Not really.
All right. Jubilee year.
Yep.
You get to do any pilgrimages?
I don't have any planned out.
All right. So I guess that's all I got, unless you got anything else.
No.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you around.
Yep.